In this session, we are starting with the development of esophagus, which is a derivative of your foregut. So, from the derivatives of foregut, we are learning the esophagus, stomach and duodenum. Your duodenum is part of the foregut and also the midgut. Okay, we'll start with the development of esophagus. The esophagus develops from the part of foregut that present between the pharynx and the stomach. Okay, look at this diagram. This is your gut tube. From here to here, it is your foregut. From this point to almost this point, it is your midgut, and from this region to this region, it is your hindgut. Okay, so your esophagus develops from the part of foregut that present between the pharynx and the stomach. So here you can see a bud that is called lung bud, which is also known as respiratory diverticulum. Okay, so this respiratory diverticulum will divide your foregut into two parts. One that is going to develop as a stomach, and the part which is present in front of the respiratory diverticulum, that is the primitive pharynx. Okay, we all know your esophagus and trachea is present. Your esophagus and trachea is present at the region of your primitive pharynx. Okay, so remember, we have a lung bud which is also known as respiratory diverticulum. This structure divides your entire foregut into two parts. From the lower part, we will see the development of stomach. From the upper part, which is known as primitive pharynx, we are going to see the development of your trachea and also the esophagus. Ventrally at the pharyngeoesophageal junction, the foregut presents a median laryngotracheal groove. Okay, so imagine this is your gut tube, that is just one section of the gut tube. From this, the laryngotracheal groove is forming here. Next, the groove bulges forward and caudally to form a tracheobronchial diverticulum. Okay, so we have a gut tube. From this groove is going to bulge in the forward direction and also caudally. So it forms some structure like this. This is your gut tube, this part, and this is the groove that is called laryngotracheal groove. It is mentioned in the second point. Okay, from this section, your tube is going to enlarge. Okay, after the enlargement, we can see a structure that is called tracheoesophageal septum here in this region. This is your tracheoesophageal septum. So this tracheoesophageal septum divide your groove region. Okay, in the first picture you can see the presence of gut tube along with a groove, that is laryngotracheal groove. As the development takes place, your laryngeal groove is going to enlarge in the size forward and also in the caudal direction. Okay, this is the enlargement. Then we can see a structure called tracheoesophageal septum, that is present between your gut part and the groove part. Okay, so this tracheoesophageal septum divides your structure into two parts. Those two parts are nothing but your esophagus and trachea. Your trachea is present in the anterior aspect or posterior aspect? It is present in the anterior, or I can say ventral also. Okay, and the esophagus is present in the posterior or dorsal aspect. So this is how the formation of your esophagus takes place in the developing embryo. Any doubts? Ventrally at the pharyngoesophageal junction, the foregut presents a structure called median laryngotracheal groove. The groove bulges forward and also in the caudal direction to form an important structure called tracheobronchial diverticulum, that is your respiratory bud, which I already mentioned. So, the tracheoesophageal septum divides the foregut caudal to the pharynx into the esophagus and to the trachea. Here you can see, this is your tube part and this is the laryngotracheal groove. Now it is growing or getting enlarged. After the enlargement in this region, we can see the presence of tracheoesophageal septum. So, this septum divides your esophagus and trachea, forming a different passage for your food and air. Okay, this is also the same pictures. This part is going to develop as a trachea and this is going to develop as your esophagus. The yellow part what you are seeing is the septum, tracheoesophageal septum. What types of cells we see in esophagus? Histology is finished, right? Esophagus. Initially, the esophagus will be short during the development process, but later it elongates due to the formation of the neck part, descent of diaphragm, and also because of the descent of your heart and lung. Okay. Initially, the lumen of the esophagus is almost obliterated by the proliferation of endodermal cells. Later on, these cells break down and esophagus is recanalized. The lining epithelium of the esophagus is derived from the endoderm of the foregut, while the musculature as well as the connective tissue of the esophagus is derived from the splanchnic mesoderm. In the yesterday session itself, we have seen the formation of somatic membrane and splanchnic membrane. So, in your esophagus, the lining epithelium part is derived from the endoderm cell, whereas the musculature and connective tissues, that means the muscular cells and the connective tissue cells, are derived from the splanchnic mesenchyme membrane or layer. Next, we have the anomalies of the developing esophagus. The first one is esophageal atresia. What do you mean by the word atresia? Formation of gap. Okay, fine. It occurs due to the failure of recanalization of the developing esophagus. I already mentioned here, in the initial development stage, your esophagus is short, but later due to few conditions, it will get elongates along with the process of recanalization. So, when the esophagus occurs, when the esophageal atresia occurs due to the fact that there will be a failure of recanalization of the developing esophagus. Okay, the esophageal atresia is often associated with the one more condition called tracheoesophageal fistula. Any idea about tracheoesophageal fistula? This condition is produced by extreme posterior deviation of the tracheoesophageal septum. In esophageal atresia, the fetus is unable to swallow the amniotic fluid. Hence, there is an abnormal increase in the amount of your amniotic fluid, producing a clinical condition called polyhydramnios. Okay, so the condition polyhydramnios is nothing but the abnormal increase in the amount of the amniotic fluid. Look at this. This is how the normal anatomy of the developing esophagus and stomach will look. We have seen the development of esophagus and also the trachea followed by stomach. But here you can see the failure of recanalization in the development of the esophagus. This is esophagus. So the failure of recanalization leads to a condition called atresia. Okay. The next condition is tracheoesophageal fistula. It occurs due to the failure of separation of tracheobronchial diverticulum from esophagus due to non-formation of tracheoesophageal septum. So there will be no formation of this septum during the development. Okay, if only the septums get developed, your gut tube and the groove part will get separate, leading to the formation of esophagus and trachea. If there is no septum, then there will be no development of your esophagus and trachea in the normal way. Okay, in most of the cases, that is in almost 85%, the lower segment of esophagus communicates with the trachea. Clinically, it presents as follows: an infant vomits every feed that he or she is given. The presence of air in the stomach is the diagnostic sign for your tracheoesophageal fistula. What did you understood by this point? So the food whatever you take through the esophagus, it will reach into your stomach part, right? But here I mentioned the lower segment of esophagus is communicating with the trachea. So somewhere this lower part is communicating with the trachea. So instead of food part, your air whatever you are taking from the trachea is entering into your stomach region. You can see here. This is the food part. We have the atresia, that is esophageal atresia. At the same time, the air which is entering into your trachea is leading to your stomach region. This causes the tracheoesophageal fistula. Your tracheoesophageal fistula occurs when there is a esophageal atresia. Okay. Next, we'll see the development of stomach. How the development of stomach takes place? In which week? In which week we can see the development of stomach? 4th week. Okay. Until which week it will continue? It starts from 4th week and 7th. Okay. So what is the proper structure we see at the end of 7th week? The stomach appears as a fusiform dilation of your foregut distal to the esophagus in the 4th week of intrauterine life. This dilation presents a ventral border, dorsal border, a left surface and right surface, and also upper end and lower end, that is cranial end and caudal end. Okay. We have already seen the mesentery part. So the dorsal part is going to attach with the dorsal mesentery and the ventral part is going to attach with the ventral mesentery. What is the name of mesentery present in your stomach region? What is the name of mesogastrium? How do we divide it? How we divide that? Ventral and dorsal. Okay. So the derivatives of dorsal mesogastriums are see here, the stomach appears as a fusiform dilation. This is your fusiform dilation. from the foregut distal to your esophagus in the 4th week of intrauterine life. So this fusiform dilation of your stomach have ventral border and dorsal border. These are the borders. So tell me which one is ventral and which one is dorsal. This is the ventral border and this is dorsal border. Okay. Next we have a left surface and right surface. This is the right surface side and this is the left surface side. And the another one is upper end and lower end. This is the caudal end or lower end and this is the cranial or upper end. Okay. So this is your tube structure. If I take a cross section of the same tube structure, it appears like this. Okay. So in the cross section part, on either side we have important nerve. What are those? In the cross section of this tube structure, we have important nerve on both the sides. It is like right side or right surface and this is left surface. Right vagus nerve and left vagus nerve. Okay. After this, there will be a rotation in the developing stomach. What is the reason behind rotation? What is the reason behind the rotation of the developing embryo? Increase in the amniotic cavity leads to your craniocaudal and lateral foldings. Here there is other reason. We have seen the mesentery structure. This is your anterior abdominal wall and this is your posterior abdominal wall. Okay. Here we have a developing stomach. In front of the stomach, your liver is also developing. On the posterior aspect, we have spleen. This is your mesentery. During the development process, this is stomach, liver and spleen. The same structure what we have seen yesterday. Okay. So during the development process, your liver will get enlarged. Right. So this enlargement of the liver leads it to move towards the which side? Right side or left side? So where your liver is present in your body? Right side. What about the stomach? So your liver will move towards the, okay, where you can see your, this is anterior abdominal wall, this is posterior abdominal wall. So basically now your liver is present in the anterior aspect. Okay. In the midline we have stomach. On the posterior aspect we have spleen. So from here, which side your liver should move? Right side or left side? And which side your stomach should move? This side or this side? Okay. See this diagram and answer at least. The first picture which I have drawn is that one, your mesentery part, and this is after the 90-degree rotation. It is moving to the right side. So your stomach will move to the left side. Sure. So your liver is moving to which side? Right side. Okay. Right side. As a result, your stomach is moving towards the left side. Okay. Go back and check your textbook once and let me know in tomorrow's class whether this is right or wrong. Okay. Now as you all mentioned, your liver is moving towards the right side. As a result, your stomach is going to move towards the left side. This will cause a 90-degree rotation in the developing embryo. Okay. So as a result of, if it moves 90 degree, the structure present here will come here, and the structure present here will come to this point, right? Right or wrong? Okay, the 90-degree rotation is taking place in your section part also. As a result, your right vagus nerve is moving in the posterior region, move towards the posterior, and your left vagus nerve will come towards the anterior region. Okay, now this is called posterior vagal trunk and anterior vagal trunk. Is it clear for everyone? In the cut section, we have right vagus nerve and left vagus nerve present on the right and left side respectively. After the 90-degree rotation, due to the enlargement of the liver, as you all mentioned, your liver will move towards the right and stomach will move towards the left, will end up with the formation of posterior vagal trunk by right vagus nerve and anterior vagal trunk by left vagus nerve. Any doubts in this? No doubts? Okay. What happens to this tubular structure? Happening in your tubular structure? It is also going to rotate in the 90-degree manner like this. Something like this, okay? It's not proper. I'll show it in the PPT. Now concentrate here. The dorsal border provides attachment to the dorsal mesentery, that is your dorsal mesogastrium, that extends from the stomach to your posterior abdominal wall. The ventral border provides attachment to ventral mesentery, that is ventral mesogastrium, that extends from the stomach to septum transversum and also the anterior abdominal wall. Your septum transversum is nothing but the diaphragm. Okay. Next, change in shape and position of the developing stomach. The change in shape of stomach occur due to the differential growth in different region. Dorsal border grows much more than the ventral border and forms greater curvature of the stomach, while the ventral border forms lesser curvature of the stomach. The changes in position of the stomach can be easily explained by assuming that it rotates twice around a longitudinal axis, that is the 90-degree rotation which I have explained, and the another one is around an antero-posterior axis. Okay, so what is going to happen when it takes the antero-posterior rotation? We'll see the rotation of the stomach. The stomach rotates twice, first around its longitudinal axis and then around its antero-posterior axis. Line connecting between the cardiac and pyloric end of stomach mark its longitudinal axis. So, that is not proper. First, the stomach rotates 90-degree clockwise around its longitudinal axis. For this reason, left vagus nerve initially supplying the left surface of the stomach now supply its anterior surface, and right vagus nerve initially supplying the right surface now supplies its posterior surface. Okay, this is the cut section of your developing tube. You can see left vagus nerve initially supplying the left surface. This is the left vagus nerve which was supplying the left surface. Now it supplies your anterior surface. And the right vagus nerve which was initially supplying the right surface is now supplying to your posterior surface. Okay. The cephalic and caudal ends of stomach originally lie in the midline. Now the stomach rotates around its antero-posterior axis. As a result, the cardiac end of stomach originally lying in the middle moves to the left and slightly downward, and pyloric end originally lying in the middle line moves to the right and slightly upward. I mentioned this is the cranial end and this is the caudal end. So your cranial end is going to be your cardiac end and your caudal end is going to be your pyloric end of the stomach. Okay, you can see here. This is the, first you see this one, B structure. This is the cut section of your developing stomach. On the right side we have right vagus nerve, on the left side we have left vagus nerve. So the 90-degree rotation takes place in the clockwise direction. After that your right vagus nerve will move to your posterior region and the left vagus nerve will move to your anterior surface. But here it is mentioned as right gastric nerve and left gastric nerve. What is the reason? I mentioned there as posterior vagal trunk and anterior vagal trunk. So what is the difference? Right gastric nerve and left gastric nerve. So your right gastric nerve and left gastric nerve are the branches from your posterior vagal trunk and anterior vagal trunk. So instead of mentioning gastric nerve, I mentioned the main branch. Okay. See this one. This is your tubular structure. Here we have already seen the formation of esophagus. Then we have upper end, lower end, and also the dorsal border, ventral border, right surface and left surface. Okay. After the 90-degree rotation, this is how your tubular structure will look. Your dorsal border is going to develop as a greater curvature and the ventral border is going to develop as a lesser curvature. Okay. Okay. The line connecting your cardiac and pyloric end of stomach marks its longitudinal axis. So this line which is connecting your cardiac end and pyloric end is called as longitudinal axis. This is the formation of your cardiac end and pyloric end. As I already mentioned, the cranial end and caudal end is going to develop as cardiac end and pyloric end. Okay, and this is the antero-posterior axis of the stomach. If you remember this point, as a result, the cardiac end of stomach originally lying in the midline. See here, these two ends are staying in the midline. Okay. After the antero-posterior axis rotation, the cardiac end is going to move from your midline to the left and slightly downward. You can see that. It has moved towards the left part and also little downwards. And the pyloric end originally lying in the midline moved towards the right and slightly upward. Here, it has moved towards the right side and little in the upward direction. Okay, these are the events that happen at the antero-posterior axis rotation. The pyloric and cardiac end which was staying in the midline will change their position. Your cardiac end will move towards the left side and also little bit downwards, and your pyloric end will move towards the right side and also little bit upwards. These are the events that takes place in the antero-posterior axis rotation. That finish the two rotations of your stomach. One is 90-degree rotation or longitudinal rotation and another one is antero-posterior rotation. So in the adults, this is how your stomach will look. Subsequently, the liver and the diaphragm are formed in the substance of the septum transversum. The ventral mesogastrium now passes from the stomach to the liver and from the liver to the diaphragm and also to your anterior abdominal wall. It is nothing but the formation of your mesentery, what we have discussed in the previous class. The part of ventral mesogastrium between the liver and the stomach becomes the lesser omentum, while the part between the liver and the diaphragm and also in the anterior abdominal wall give rise to the ligaments of your liver. Okay. Next, similarly, the dorsal mesogastrium is divided by the development of the spleen into a part between the stomach and spleen, that is gastrosplenic ligament, and a part between spleen and posterior abdominal wall called the linorenal ligament. Along with these two, we have seen gastrophrenic ligament and also the greater omentum. This is to show the development of your liver and also the spleen. Okay, this is the structure where we can see the enlargement of liver taking place and moving towards the right direction. So your stomach will move towards the left direction. Okay, and the derivatives of your ventral mesogastrium and dorsal mesogastrium. Take 2 minutes and revise the picture once. So if the question is anything related to development, you better write the diagrams as much as possible, explaining each and every step in the diagram itself. More than theory, go for the diagrams. What are the important structures we see in the development of esophagus? Laryngo. Okay, next. Okay, which is the important septum we see in the development of esophagus? Tracheoesophageal septum. Okay. So at the end of the development process, we will get two structures. What are those? Esophagus and trachea, that is the passage for your food and air. Okay. After that, we have seen the development of stomach. So what is going to happen in the development of stomach? What is the important key point to know the development of stomach? Rotation. Okay, there are two types of rotation. One is 90-degree rotation and another one is antero-posterior. Okay, fine. What is happening in 90-degree rotation? So in the 90-degree rotation, the stomach, which is present in the midline of your anterior and between your anterior and posterior abdominal wall, will move towards the left side due to the enlargement of the liver, which is moving towards the right side. Okay, so once the rotation happens, your right vagus nerve and left vagus nerve, which initially present on the right surface and left surface of the developing embryo, will now move towards the anterior and posterior surface or aspect, that at last it will give right gastric nerve and left gastric nerve. So what is going to happen in the antero-posterior rotation? The cardiac end and the pyloric end, which was initially staying in the midline, will now move towards the right and left side. Your cardiac end will move towards left and also little bit downwards, whereas your pyloric end will move little bit right side and also little upward, in the upward direction. Okay, that's how the development of stomach takes place. Any doubts, class? No doubts? So what are the anomalies of developing stomach? Okay, see here one more important point. The epithelial lining and also the gastric glands of the stomach are derived from the endoderm of the primitive foregut. The rest of the layers of the stomach, that is muscular layer and serous layer, are derived from surrounding splanchnic intraembryonic mesoderm. Gastric glands appear in the 3rd month of the intrauterine life, whereas the oxyntic and zymogenic cells appear in the 4th month of the intrauterine life. So what is this oxyntic and zymogenic cells? Histology of stomach is finished, right? Okay. Are they present in the adult stomach? Because I mentioned it will appear in the 3rd month and it will appear in the 4th month, that too in the intrauterine life. So can we see those cells in the after the birth of the embryo? Yes. So okay, where we can see them? What is the significance of these cells? Next we have anomalies of the stomach. The very first condition is congenital hypertrophic pyloric stenosis. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by stenosis? Okay, what is going to happen in that? Pulmonary. Okay, hypertrophy of the left ventricle, right ventricle. Okay. Then, is there anything mentioned as pulmonary stenosis? Constriction. Okay, fine. Then hypertrophy, enlargement. Okay, fine. It occurs due to the hypertrophy of circular muscles present at the pylorus region. It causes narrowing of the pyloric end, converting it into probe admitting channel. This causes consequent obstruction to passage of food through the pylorus. Clinically, it represents an enlargement of the abdomen with a palpable mass in the right hypochondriac region. Where we can see the right hypochondriac region? How many regions are there in our abdominal area? 9. What are those? Right and left. Okay. Hypochondria. Then right umbilical. Okay, fine. Show me where we can see the right hypochondriac region. Where we can see the right hypochondriac region? Both of you. Show me the right hypochondriac region. Okay. So we can see the enlargement in the abdomen, especially in the right hypochondriac region with visible peristalsis. This condition can be surgically corrected. Okay. See the difference now. This is your diaphragm and this is your esophagus part. This is the cardiac end, greater curvature, lesser curvature and the pyloric end. Okay, in the pyloric end we have an important muscle called pyloric sphincter muscle. This is the normal opening to your duodenum, that is the small intestine, and here you can see the hypertrophy of your pyloric sphincter muscles that is causing this stenosis, that means constriction of your pyloric end part. Okay, any doubts? Any doubts in this? Next we will see the development of duodenum. As I already mentioned, your duodenum is going to develop from both foregut and midgut region. Okay, the duodenum develops from two sources, that is dual origin. Proximal half is derived from foregut and distal half is derived from the midgut. The details are as follows. The first and second part of the duodenum up to the opening of common bile duct develop from foregut, and the second part of the duodenum below the opening of common bile duct along with the third and fourth part develop from the midgut. Okay. Here you can see. This is the common bile duct. Above this part is going to develop from the foregut, below this part is going to develop from your midgut. The developing duodenum forms a loop that is attached to the posterior abdominal wall by a mesentery called mesoduodenum. The loop is present in the sagittal plane. Its apex is at the junction of the foregut and midgut. The clockwise rotation of the stomach to the left makes the duodenal loop to fall on the right side. Its mesentery, that is mesoduodenum, is observed by a process called zygosis and become retroperineal. What do you mean by retroperineal? Retroperitoneal. What makes the organ retroperitoneal? Retroperitoneal, sorry. Behind the peritoneum. Which peritoneum? How many types of peritoneum are there? 3 types. 2 types. What are those? Silence, others. Stop talking. Okay. Parietal peritoneum and visceral peritoneum. Okay, fine. So this is your posterior abdominal wall and this is your dorsal mesentery. Inside this we have a developing duodenum. Okay. Now if you see, the loop is present in the sagittal plane. While studying the development of your stomach, I said there will be a fusiform formation of the or enlargement of the stomach. In the same way, for the development of intestine, it will form a loop-like structure. So your gut tube will be like this in the initial time. So your stomach is going to form structure like this, whereas your intestine part, that is duodenum, is going to form a loop-like structure. Okay, this is the loop formation of your intestine. So next, if you see, the clockwise rotation of the stomach to the left makes the duodenum loop fall towards the right side. First we have your gut tube. This is the gut tube. From this, for the development of stomach and the development of intestine, it will go under certain changes. Formation of fusiform elevation in the stomach region and formation of loop in the intestine part. This is the loop. Okay. Now your stomach will move towards the left side. This will move towards the left side, making your loop move towards the right side. Okay. This is how the section of your developing duodenum will look. This is your posterior abdominal wall. Here we have dorsal mesentery, then followed by the developing duodenum. As the development takes place, it will move towards the right side. Okay. This is moving towards the right side. Once it moves towards the right side, this is how the structure will look. This is your posterior abdominal wall. This is the developing duodenum. And this is the dorsal mesentery. So now what is this? This part? That is the mesentery, which helping your duodenum to get attached to your posterior abdominal wall. That is nothing but the mesoduodenum. This is mesoduodenum. And this layer, what you are seeing here, is your parietal peritoneum. Okay. After the rotation, girls, so after the rotation, your parietal peritoneum and mesoduodenum will fuse together and it will disappear. Okay. Once the disappear happens, this is how your embryo will look. So for the development of duodenum, there will be a formation of loop-like structure. From the loop-like structure, we have taken the cross section. Okay, we have posterior abdominal wall, dorsal mesentery, and the developing embryo. Due to the shift of your stomach towards the left side, your duodenal part will move towards the right side. Okay, this is the rotation part. So once the rotation happens, your duodenum, that is the developing duodenum, will now get attached to your posterior abdominal wall through a structure or a mesentery called mesoduodenum. And one more layer we have here is parietal peritoneum. Okay. Now then the process of zygosis takes place. Zygosis is nothing but the fusion of your parietal peritoneum and mesoduodenum. Later the fusion part will disappear. After the disappearance, this is how your developing duodenum will look. Okay. See here. This is the loop part. And this is your mesoduodenum. Here we have posterior abdominal wall, and this is the apex part of your duodenal loop. We have posterior abdominal wall followed by peritoneum, and then we have mesoduodenum, then we have duodenum part. Okay. This one. This is not dorsal mesentery, that is your mesoduodenum. Okay. Next, your mesoduodenum will help the developing embryo to come in contact with the posterior abdominal wall by taking the right rotation. Once the mesoduodenum and your parietal peritoneum disappears by the process of zygosis, this is how your developing duodenum will look. This make your developing duodenum into a retroperitoneal organ. However, the mesoduodenum persists in relation to a small portion of a duodenum adjoining the pylorus. This part is seen as a triangular shadow that is also known as duodenal cup. Initially, development of the lumen of the duodenum is obliterated by the proliferation of the endodermal cells. Later on, cells in the lumen disintegrate and the duodenum gets recanalized. Okay. Anomalies of the duodenum. Duodenal stenosis, it occurs because of the incomplete recanalization of the duodenum. The cells in lumen disintegrate only in small part, producing a narrow lumen. Duodenal stenosis commonly affects third and fourth parts of the duodenum, and duodenal stenosis produces partial obstruction in the food passage. Duodenal atresia, the second condition, it occurs due to the failure of recanalization. Your duodenal stenosis occurs due to the incomplete recanalization, whereas your duodenal atresia occurs due to the failure of the recanalization. The duodenal atresia nearly always occurs just distal to the opening of the hepatopancreatic ampulla, but occasionally involves the third part of the duodenum. Clinically, in infants with duodenal atresia, vomiting begins a few hours after the birth. The vomit almost always contains the bile. The double bubble sign seen in the X-ray abdomen or ultrasound indicates the duodenal atresia. You can see here. This is the normal condition and this is the site of atresia where the recanalization fails to happen. Okay. This is how your double bubble sign will look in the X-ray. You can see the bubble part here and here in this region. See. This one and this one. Any doubts? Any doubts in the development of duodenum? So your duodenum develops from two parts or from the two sources, that is both from the foregut and the midgut. So which part develops from the foregut? Which part develops from the foregut? First and second part, second half, okay, until the common bile duct is present, and below that it is developed from the midgut. How the development of duodenum takes place? What is the procedure? First we can see the formation of loop structure in the gut tube, okay. If you take the cross section of that loop section, what we will see? We will see the presence of posterior abdominal wall, mesoduodenum. In the mesoduodenum, we have developing embryo, okay. This one. So, Once your stomach move towards the which side? Left side. Your duodenum will move towards the right side. Okay. After the rotation, this is how your structure will look. Now a process called zygosis will take place. That means the fusion of your mesoduodenum and parietal peritoneum, and that fused part will later disappear in the development process. This is how your developing embryo will look, and this structure is the retroperitoneal organ. Okay. What are the abnormalities of duodenum? Duodenal stenosis and duodenal atresia. What happens in duodenal stenosis? Incomplete recanalization takes place. What about the atresia? Absence of recanalization. There is one more condition called double bubble sign. Okay. Any other doubts? Any doubts? So what are the derivatives of your midgut? We have already seen the development of duodenum. It is also one of the derivative. Other than duodenum, what are the derivatives of your midgut? Jejunum, ileum, sigmoid colon, appendix. Okay. In the next class, we will see the derivatives of your midgut. If possible, we will discuss the derivative of hindgut also. Otherwise, we will try to complete the derivatives of your midgut. So, until now, in the development of GIT, we have finished the foldings, both craniocaudal folding and lateral folding. What is mesentery also we have studied, and also the derivatives of mesentery, followed by the development of derivatives of your foregut, that is esophagus, stomach, and also duodenum with abnormalities. Okay. Any doubts, class? Fine. Then we'll end the class. Thank you.